Good evening, YouTube. This is going to be a quick video response to VogterViking. Before I start this video, I would like to make two housekeeping notes. First of all, I have made a blog post, and it is on the comments debate I had in the comment section of my video on drones, which honestly doesn't make me look pretty, but I'll be honest, I get very annoyed when people misrepresent what I say. Second thing, I'm going to start monetizing this channel. Hopefully there should be an ad before you watch this. The main reason for this is the fact that my job covers my bills and everything, covers college, but I don't have a lot of extra spending money, so any little bit helps, so I decided to monetize my channel. Anyway, this is a response to Vogter's video on austerity policies. And I'm responding to this video not because I disagree with him necessarily, as I'm currently looking into the subject matter. However, I feel Vogter makes some mistakes when it comes to economics, and makes some mistakes when representing his opponent's position. First things first, the main problem is Vogter talks about how if austerity policies worked, he asks how come Greece, which he claims has been under austerity for 5 years, despite the fact that Greece only began austerity policies mainly in 2011 when it resulted in mass rioting. But he claims that if this was a worthwhile policy, how come Greece has no more jobs, or how come Greece doesn't have more jobs, rather. He then talks about how the Greece economy has not grown, which is true. And the reason that it's not grown is that anyone who understands austerity policies would understand that they're not designed to create jobs. These policies are designed to reduce government deficits and reduce debt per GDP ratios. Anyone who understands economics, even cursory, would know that cutting government expenditures, which is factored in when it comes to gross domestic product, would know that that shifts the aggregate demand curve to the left, meaning reducing aggregate demand. And because, if you're a Keynesian, this would make sense to you, the marginal propensity to consume multiplier, this would actually mean the demand curve shifts farther than the initial government cuts. And when it comes to austerity, the two main aspects of it would shift the aggregate demand curve to the left. And these are cutting government expenditures and raising taxes. Now, this then would lead me to focus on to the title and the main point of Vogter's video, is that austerity policies don't work. This is entirely contingent upon what your definition of the term work is. If your idea is to have the economy grow and have full employment, then no, these policies do not work. But that might not be the goal of the people instituting these policies. They might think, wow, I really need to rein in the mass debt that we have. At which point, yes, it's good at closing off deficits, but what we can see in the short term, at least in the case of Greece, is that this does not reduce debt to GDP ratios, as Greece's debt per GDP ratio went from 143 to 165% in 2012. However, there are estimates out there from the Congressional Budget Office, and I would like to make this clear that they are estimates, that if the United States went under modest austerity policies, the debt per GDP ratio would shrink from its current 73% in 2013 to 58% in 2022, as opposed to rising to around 90% in 2022, according to the estimates, although this will actually raise unemployment by 1.4%, according to their estimates. Now on to some minor mistakes that Vogter makes. He tries to make a comparison of the economy in his native Denmark to the economy of Greece, by saying Denmark is undergoing modest austerity policies, but our Danish economy is fine. And I'm not sure if he is trying to make a comparison. If you are Vogter, or if you are not Vogter, then we can ignore this. But I feel that it's a bit unfair to compare Denmark to Greece for a multitude of reasons. Firstly, Greece has a lot more debt than Denmark. As mentioned before, Greece's debt to GDP ratio is 165%. Denmark's is around 45%. Also, Denmark is not in the Eurozone, so it has its own currency, the Danish crown, which obviously means that you have control of your monetary policy, as opposed to Greece, who is in the Eurozone and does not. This heavily impacts your ability to recover from an economic downturn. I don't feel it's a fair comparison to try and relate Denmark to Greece, because they're vastly different, despite the fact that they are European modern economies. Another main problem I have with your video would be the fact that you say austerity is not necessary. you never really say why people feel it's necessary, and that would be the fact that high amounts of government debt results in higher interest rates, and also results in inflation, which are both very bad. So, as these can stunt economic growth. So those are why people feel it's necessary, and then you go on to say that this is like cutting off your arm to remove a scratch on your finger. Now, this would lead me to ask you what constitutes a scratch. 165% of debt per GDP as the case of Greece, 73% as the case here in the United States, or 45% as the case in Denmark. You then go on to talk about how in an economy where people use money to buy and sell goods, which is pretty much every modern market out there, with the exception of, say, a private transaction, a micro market, where someone says, oh, I'll trade you this for this. But pretty much most transactions are using money. You say that cutting people off of their money is bad. Firstly, this is a common mistake. People are not being cut off of money. They're being cut off of government income assistance. And this, of course, is correct, that cutting people off of their government income assistance is bad in terms of creating jobs, keeping the economy stable. However, when you look into Denmark's welfare system, because you then go on to talk about austerity in Denmark, you would understand that there are some prominent controversies about people who've abused Denmark's rather generous welfare system. There was a case of a man dubbed Lazy Robert who stayed on welfare since 2001 and didn't even bother looking for a job. The problem with social welfare programs, as great as they are in the case of, say, public education, universal health care, things like that, they're great programs, but they have to be paid for. And when you have a rather generous system, it becomes obvious that it can't quite pay for itself, and the 45% debt per GDP ratio seems to me to level that out, although since the global economy is kind of downturned, there is a chance that a lot of debt could have been a result from deficits due to a lack of tax revenue. I would have to look at the numbers on that. Haven't yet. But it's just something I think you should keep in mind. You then go on to talk about how rich people have gotten, since the 2008 financial crisis, have gotten 30% richer. You claim the money has stayed the same, which I disagree. And I can only speak truly for the United States, though it's most likely true in all cases. When there's an economic downturn, the Federal Reserve of the United States will take certain actions. They will try and keep interest rates as low as possible, and do whatever they can to encourage the creation of loans, the creation of money, the M1 money supply. So when you say the money has stayed the same, I have a hard time believing that. Anyway, you then say this money has to come from somewhere. And then you insinuate, though I'm hoping you're not actually saying this, that it comes from your child's education and care for the elderly, care for the poor, and I don't know how you can say this, because this would imply that the money that is saved by cutting, say, public education is then taken, put in, and then given to the wealthy, which is not the case. When the money is cut from these programs in order to close a deficit, the money's just not spent. And if it's money that was designed to close down a deficit, it's money the government doesn't have to borrow. So I feel that this is a bizarre thing to say. Secondly, you then go on to say that rich people are hoarders, and if they were poor and hoarding newspapers, we'd think they're all crazy. Well, the difference is I can't exactly walk into, say, a coffee shop and hand them this and get a cup of coffee, because it's not a unit of exchange, which is what money is. This is a $50 coin. This is worth 50 cents to whoever thinks that this is acceptable, which would be someone like myself. And I can use that for private and public debts. Money is a unit of exchange, and what makes something a unit of exchange is whether or not someone accepts it. You know, the whole reason why monopoly money isn't really money. Now, the one thing I would like to point out to Vogter, he keeps talking about how the rich keep getting richer and the poor are being made poorer, and these programs helping the poor are being cut. I don't think he talks much about, I don't even think he mentions it at all, about the fact that austerity policies, the other half of it is tax increases. Now, you don't have to do these, but they're completely within the guise of austerity policies. Which would lead to me, would you support, say, Denmark raising its equivalent of the capital gains tax? What about taxes on the rich? After all, you supported occupied Denmark. Now, the last part is you talk about how universal health care programs are being cut. I'm not sure if you said more people will get sick, which is wrong. Whether or not there is health insurance and stuff like that out there, I don't think that ties directly to contracting diseases. But I'm not sure if that's what you said, because I haven't watched a video in a couple hours. I haven't watched a video, I'm just straight shooting through this. However, I'm not sure if you said that, so if you didn't, I apologize. Though you do say that sick people don't consume. And I have an issue with that. And I think if you were someone who works in the pharmaceutical industry, or providing healthcare equipment, or providing healthcare, I think you would disagree with the notion that sick people don't consume. They do consume. What one can actually argue is that sick people are not quite as productive as someone who is healthy. And this leads me to the final word to you. You keep talking about how the rich don't care. Well, having a mass amount of inflation and high interest rates affects the rich. Having a mass of stupid and unhealthy people also hurts the rich. So, that kind of would be my video towards you. Those are the mistakes I think you have made. And I hope you have a good day.